Hello, you're looking at the new 2023 Portland Meadows Heads Up Poker Champion. I'm Philip, and I just last weekend entered this 5-round, 2-day Heads Up No Limit Hold'em tournament at Portland Meadows, and I came out on top, first place amongst all 31 other entrants in this bracket. It was a great tournament, and I thought I would go through and break down how I won it. I'm going to go over the 7 most critical hands of the tournament, including the biggest bluff of my life. This hand had $8,000 on the line, and I ran a bluff, and it worked. And I'll tell you all about it. That's coming right up. But first, I got a few photos. So this is me right after winning. I have 1.6 million chips in front of me. That's all the chips. This is a photo. I'm in the hat here on the right. A photo of the third round. This is, there's me on the right again in my hat. This is the semifinals. And this is a photo of the final round starting on Sunday. I just want to mention, of course, that the number one most important thing to winning any poker tournament is good luck. So I never lost an all-in for my tournament life, obviously. And over 10 hours of poker over 2 days and 5 matches, that's really lucky. So that's number one. Number two is I think I got lucky on the bracket. So people were telling me that some of the folks who entered the tournament, it's $1,000 buy-in, by the way, were professional poker players. So I didn't know him, but this guy on here, Max, someone showed me his Hendon mob, and he has $2.5 million of winnings. Thankfully, I didn't have to play him. He got knocked out earlier by Matt, so never had to worry about that. So another bit of luck in poker outside the cards that you might not expect. But I do think that the third reason that I came out winning in this tournament is I played the best poker of my life. I spent 2 weeks ahead of time studying, and one thing I want to share with you is if you go to Ignition, so ignitioncasino.eu, they have a bunch of sit-and-goes right here. So you can go to the sit-and-goes, and they just have heads-up tournaments you can play from $1 and up. So I started climbing the ladder from $1 to $5 to $10 to $25, and I played dozens and dozens of heads-up matches on Ignition to practice my strategy ahead of time. So anyone who's interested, Ignition Casino, it's a great little place to play. But yeah, let us start going over the hands now, and we'll start with round one. If you were there at Portland, you know the hand I'm talking about. Okay, round one, hand one, the first hand of the entire tournament. This hand is famous/infamous if you were there on Saturday at Portland Meadows. It was me and Carrie, and I had not even sat down yet. Right, I was taking my jacket off, the dealer's dealing. I look at my cards, pocket kings. This is going to be a good tournament. So Carrie raises. We're playing 166 big blinds deep. So we start with 50,000 chips, 100, 300. Carrie raises up to 3 big blinds. I have pocket kings. I 3-bet to 4K. I get 4-bet to 16K. This is what dreams are made out of. I think about it. I 5-bet shove all in. I hear Carrie say out loud, I don't think I can fold this. Announces a call. He's got pocket tens, I've got pocket kings. It doesn't get much better than this. The run out is all low cards, and I bust out Carrie in the very first hand of the very first match of the tournament. So for me, that's great. Some people asked me, was I worried about aces? No, right? Even if you're playing nine-handed, you can't go folding kings. So heads up, you really can't fold kings. So I was not worried about aces. But the other question that arises is, should they call off 160 big blinds with tens? Well, no, is the plain answer, but let's double check that. I'm going to bring up Equilab here, and let's just put in tens. And then for my range, right, what is my 5-bet shove all in range? Heads up. Well, let's take a guess and say aces and kings, obviously. And then let's give me queens, jacks, tens, and even nines, so that I could be shoving worse than tens. Let's give me ace king, and let's even give me a bluff, ace 5 suited. Now, if we run this, you'll see pocket tens is a 40-60 underdog. So 20% is a good amount in poker. But also let's think about my range actually, right? I'm not a computer, I'm a human being. What am I really 5-bet shoving with, right, in reality? Probably not nines, tens, or jacks. Probably not ace king offsuit, and I probably don't have any bluffs at all. So if we go with this range at 166 big blinds, right, pocket tens is a 3-1 underdog, 25-75. Now I just want to mention something because it's easy after the fact. I'm sitting in front of a computer, relaxed. There's not $1,000 on the line. It's easy to say what should or shouldn't have been done. But when you're playing heads-up poker and you look down at pocket tens, it's really hard to fold. And I think I know what they were thinking, right? So they might have been thinking, hey, pocket tens, it's probably a flip. And I happen to know my opponent, Kerry loves, or he's not afraid of gambling it up, right? I've seen him gamble it up a lot and embrace that high variance. So again, it's easy for me later on to say you should or shouldn't call with pocket tens here, but I don't think it's terrible. Pocket tens is a really good hand, heads up. But anyway, I was on the good end of the cooler. I had the kings. It's easy to play poker when you have kings. And that's that. So we're going to head on over to the next hand. Oh, actually, you know what? Let me mention one more thing about this. This is a good example of how aggression is good in poker. So if we look at the action of the hand, actually, I realize there's one more thing I want to say about this hand because it's a great example of why aggression wins in poker. If we look at the action on this hand, so raise, 3-bet, 4-bet, 5-bet shove, calling with tens here is dubious. If instead it had gone raise, 3-bet, and then they 4-bet shove tens all in, right? So go from 12 bigs to shoving 160. That's actually really scary. Because if we go back to what my range is, right? Suppose my range was, this that we had originally. If I bet 12 big blinds and get shoved on for 160, huge overbet, right? I'm folding nines, tens, jacks. I bet I'm even folding queens because that looks like aces. Definitely folding ace king, never calling with that. I don't have any bluffs, right? So if instead of four betting, Carey had shoved all in, that play I think would be much better because it would fold out literally everything except aces and kings. Now I did have aces and kings this time, right? But having that fold equity is huge, right? So there's a difference between shoving all in and calling all in. All right, just wanted to mention that. Now let's go pick out the next hand. All right, next we're going to look at a hand from round 2, which was essentially my first round. And it was overall a very smooth round. I never really had a chip deficit. I was either even or ahead the whole time. And this is the hand that really gave me momentum to take it the rest of the way. So we now have 100K starting. It's double each time. And the blinds are 501K, so we're about 100 big blinds deep. They raise it up, 2.5 big blinds. I call with the ace-9 offsuit. Ace-9, by the way, is good enough to re-raise. Heads up, but this time I just called. We see a flop of ace-10-9, so I flop 2 pair. This is fantastic. I check and let the pre-flop aggressor bet into me, and I can call or raise. My hand's so good I didn't want to push them out just in case they're bluffing, so I called. The turn is the king, which brings in 1 draw. So Jack Queen gets there. It's now a straight, but all the club draws missed. So I thought to myself, the board is a bit wet, right? There is protection that I need. They could have a draw. And I think it might look bluffy to lead in this spot. So what I do is I lead for about half pot. The idea being that they might think, right, what is he saying he has here, right? Does he really have Jack Queen, right? Maybe he's trying to bluff me with a missed flush draw. And I'm hoping they have an ace and we'll call a reasonable bet, which they do. And the river, the gin card, I now have a boat. I have nothing to worry about, even things like ace, king, whatever, no big deal. So I do a medium-sized bet, a little more than half pot, hoping to be called by ace, king, or just an ace, potentially even raised by ace, king. They call, and I net myself a hefty pot, about 60 bigs, or 60K, and now I have almost a 2-to-1 chip advantage. Not the most interesting hand in terms of poker, but that's what got me momentum to then take down the second round. So let's move on, go back to my hands, and check out the third round. All right, so round 3 is when things really started to get interesting because my opponent was very aggressive. Now, one thing I told myself before the tournament started and that I had been practicing is I wanted to consciously adjust to my opponents, right? I would observe them during the first level. I would play passively, observe them, and then adjust what I was doing to hopefully counter what they were doing, right? So the person I was playing in round 3 was very aggressive. Every other hand, they would overbet the river, like 125% pot on the river with bluffs, with value. Anytime I showed weakness, right, like check if I check the turn, check the river, overbet incoming. Also, pre-flop, they would raise it up 4 or 5 times the big blind. So large raise, large overbet on the river, lots and lots of bluffs. So I made a mental note of that. The way I adjusted is I folded more and then limp called stronger hands, with the idea being that I'm able to accept that aggression because my hands are really good. Now, obviously the cards have to cooperate, but that was my adjustment. So let's get into this hand. 7-8 of clubs, great hand. I raise it up, and they call. 7, 9, 9. That's pretty good. I beat virtually everything that doesn't have a 9, and it's unlikely they have a 9 because there's 2 on the board already. So like 10s, jacks, queens, kings, aces, they should obviously 3-bet those. And then I have the only other pair on the board, the 7. So I think most of the time I'm ahead. But they bet into me. So they lead into my pre-flop aggression for a modest half-pot bet. Well, there's 2 spades. They could have a draw. They could have 10 jack. They could have ace king and just, pushing me around. So I think, again, I think I have the best hand a lot of the time. I call. The turn is a brick. They lead into me again for half pot. And again, I still have the 7. If they don't have a 9, I have the best hand. So I call. On the river, there's a 10, which some draws, they could hit a 10 if they had 10 jack. And again, for the 3rd time, they lead into me for half pot. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I can probably call. It's a half pot bet. We have huge stacks. If I'm wrong, it's fine, right? But then I started thinking further, right? Would they bet a 10? I don't think I would bet a 10, right? I would check and see showdown. They don't have would they have an overpair? Probably not. That would 3-bet. Would they bluff here? Right? I'm calling multiple streets on a paired board. I could have a 9, right? So the more I thought about it, I thought about Occam's razor. They probably just have a 9, right? They probably have a 9, and they really want me to call. So they're giving me a half pot reasonable price. And this also explains, like, why is it every other hand? I just told you, every other hand, huge overbet, whether it's a bluff or value, huge overbet on the river. Now suddenly, a nice half pot bet, please call, this is a value bet, right? That's what I was thinking in my head. Again, only 16K. And I decided to just fold. I'll never know if that was right. Now, a few days later, I feel pretty confident they had a 9. That's what I still think. I'll never know. But this is part of the adjustment I made. I watched what they were doing, right? How aggressive they were being, overbetting everything. And I wondered, why is it different this time? I think they had a 9. So let's move on to the next hand. All right, we're still in round 3. And now we're going to go over the hand that won me the round. If you remember what I said just a minute ago, the adjustment I made against this very aggressive player was that I folded more and called with stronger hands. So this is one of those times. I have ace queen, a really good hand, especially heads up, and I am setting the trap. So they raise it up pretty big, as I said, up to 16K, and I smooth call. It's a flop, ace, 7, 9. Everything's going according to plan. I check to the razor, they bet into me, and I call. The turn is, again, the best card I could possibly hope for. Another ace. I now have trip aces, and I am hoping that they have an ace as well. I continue the trap. I check it to the aggressor, and they bet. So I call once more. The river's a brick, and I decide to continue the charade. I check, and they go for a relatively large bet, slightly more than half pot. Now, I did think about this for a minute, because obviously trip aces with a queen kicker is a great hand. But as I mentioned before, they tend to overbet when they're bluffing and bet half pot when they have value. So I'm expecting this to be a value bet. And value bets include full houses, right? Ace 7, Ace 9, Ace 3, they can have all of those. Also, even though 45K is only half pot, it's most of their stack, right? So what they're saying is that they're willing to go with this hand, right? It doesn't look like a bluff. It looks like at least an ace, but given the trap that I've set, I strongly think that they have either ace jack or ace 10. A boat might have even just shoved all in or played it slightly differently. So anyway, of course, I call. I decide I don't have to raise, right? There's no point in losing an extra 10 bigs if they do have a boat. And given that I'll have like a 10-1 chip advantage and they only have 10 bigs if I win the hand, I'm probably going to win the match anyway. So that's why I just called, even though I had aces, 3 aces with a queen. So I just call. And yes, they had ace 10, exactly what I thought. They're down to 10 bigs. We shove it all in and I win eventually. So on to the semi-finals. All right, round 4 of the semifinals. This time my opponent was a strong, fundamentally sound player. I was observing them and I didn't notice any obvious leaks. They raised the right amount, they defended the right amount, they 3-bet the right amount. They didn't get out of line with huge overbets or huge bluffs, just kind of normal bluffs. So at this point, we'd been playing for about an hour. We had even stacks. Neither of us had an advantage. And I didn't think that I had an edge at all. So I'm telling you that because now I look down at ace king. I decide this one time I'm going to limp because, again, they're a fundamentally sound player and they've been attacking weakness. So I limp. Right on cue, they raise. I'm absolutely 4-betting this, 3-betting this to 40K. And now I get 4-bet to 105K. At this point, I really think I'm up against pocket queens. As a step back, the reason ace king is such a good hand is that it's never dominated, right? So ace queen, ace jack, they can be dominated by a better ace. And ace king blocks the hands that you don't want to call. So it blocks aces and it blocks kings. That means when you get called with ace king, it's very likely to be queens. Furthermore, if we go back to the very first hand, right, pocket tens is a statistically better hand than ace king. So why is ace king a better hand to go all in with? Because you can't make a mistake. Again, on the very first hand, if you remember, going all in with tens versus kings, that's a mistake, right? If you get it all in with tens versus jacks, queens, kings, or aces, you're in very bad shape. It's very hard to make a mistake with ace king. Even if they have kings, I still have 30% equity. All I need to do is hit an ace, right? The only hand ace king doesn't do well against is aces, right? And if that happens, it's just time to go home, right? So that's the reason ace king is so strong, even though it's mathematically less strong than some pairs like tens. Ace king is a better all-in hand because you won't make mistakes with it. Even when they have pocket queens, right? I'm flipping. So I think about it. I look at the blinds. We're at 50 bigs, right? Ace king is too good to fold. I'm all in. They think it over, right? And they say out loud, okay, you're probably ahead. They think I have a pair, right? You're probably ahead. They call and they show ace queen suited. So this again, the best possible situation I could ask for. I'm not flipping. I'm a huge favorite. And they didn't really make a mistake, right? Ace queen suited, 40 or 50 big blinds deep, heads up. Really hard to fold. And it's a really good hand for the same reason ace king is a good hand. If I had jacks, even if I had queens and kings, all they have to do is hit one ace. So it's hard to make a mistake shoving all in with ace queen, but I have the ace king, so I dominate them. And it runs out, we both hit our pair. There's a queen and a king and an ace, so we're two pair over two pair, and I take it down. And that was round 4. So let's move on to the finals. Okay, we're now in the final match of the heads up tournament, round 5. And we're getting to the biggest bluff that I've ever made in my entire life. So let's take a look at it. First, some context. There is $8,000 on the line. 8,000. So this hand is worth about that much money. My opponent is a very loose, aggressive, feel-based player, an emotional player, not someone who calculates the math, the chips in the pot, and pot odds and stuff like that. The kind of player who reaches for a handful of chips and just throws it out there. So every bet, every raise was just a random handful of chips. It's not totally random, right? But like, it wasn't like they raised to 4x every time. It was grab a couple chips, throw it out there. So that's the kind of opponent I was playing. And my adjustment to that is to try to be more psychological, right? What are they thinking and why are they thinking it? And this was by far the hardest match of the tournament. I was, in fact, getting crushed. So at this stage, if you look at the chips, they had 3 times as many chips as me. So I'm a 3-to-1 underdog in chips. I still have 25 bigs, right? So it's, you're never out. You should never count yourself out of a tournament. But again, I was getting crushed. They were playing, again, very aggressively, loose aggressive, and they were hitting every hand, right? Every once in a while, I'd think I'm going to look them up, maybe it's a bluff, and just get smashed. So I was emotionally feeling pretty bad right now, and they were doing great. They were chatting, talking with me, talking with the dealer, big smile on their face, just a great time. And at some point, so as I said earlier, right, the cards have to cooperate in poker. But in a tournament situation, unlike cash where you can just sit there and just wait, right? In a tournament, you sometimes have to make stuff happen. So this hand, I had 9-3 of diamonds, and I raised it up, 32K, a min raise. Why did I do that? Because I had to make something happen. It's not the greatest hand, but it's not the worst hand, right? It's a suited hand. It can be a tricky hand, right? If you hit a 9 or a 3, people might not expect it, right? So anyway, I had to make something happen. I went for it. They didn't 3-bet, which is good. So I got to see the flop. So they called, and the flop is ace, 2, 5, 2 diamonds. So this is a pretty good flop for my kind of junky hand. I have the diamond draw. If I hit it, I'm right back in the tournament. Now they bet into me. You might see this as a theme, people leading into me even though I'm the pre-flop aggressor. But again, this is a field-based player. He grabs the stack of chips, throws it into the pot. And I said, well, I've got a flush draw, I'm not going anywhere, right? So I call, and the turn is another ace, but not a diamond. So this is very interesting. I have 9 high. I have a flush draw, but there's only one card left, right? So I have about a 1 in 5, 20% chance of actually hitting the flush on the river. Not very good. And I have 9 high. And I decided, get busy living or get busy dying, right? I had to make a stand. I couldn't wait to just blind out. I had to do something to turn the match around. So when he bet again, 25K, I thought to myself, first of all, a read of kind of the player pool, right? If people bet the same amount twice in a row, right, rather than increasing it each street as the pot increases, the same amount twice in a row, often, right, not all, oh, just got cut off, I'm back. Often the same bet twice in a row is a block bet. It means they're worried about something. They want to see where they're at with a probing bet, maybe get to the river and see showdown. And I saw the board, and the fact that there's 2 aces on the board makes it less likely that they have an ace, and they might be worried that I have an ace. So I think I can credibly represent an ace here, especially a small ace, which would be a boat potentially. I'm putting them on a mid pair. So something like 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, who were pretty confident on the flop as long as they didn't have an ace, they have the best hand. Now that a second ace comes out, if I have trip aces, they're dead. So they're a little bit concerned. That's what I was thinking when they bet 25K twice. So anyway, I think, do I call, miss the flush, fold the river, and have less than 20 bigs left? Or do I go for it? So I raise to 100K. There's a lot of reasons why I think this is a good bluff. First of all, it looks like I'm ready to go all in on the river. Right, so if they call, I'll have 75% pot left on the river. They're going to have to ask themselves, okay, 100K, that's not crazy, but do I want to call another 300K on the river, right? Psychologically, remember what I said, this is an emotional player. Psychologically, they're riding high. They're winning the match. They don't have to take a crazy risk. Why call this crazy bet and then call an all in on the river when you're already a 3-1 chip lead? Why not just play it safe, fold, move on to the next hand? That's what I was hoping for. I think, based on what happens next, I got very lucky. So my opponent goes deep, deep into the tank for minutes, and they mumble to themselves under their breath, and I hear them say, like, you've got a full house already, huh? You've boated up already. And he's mumbling that under his breath. And so I'm thinking to myself, oh no, he really has an ace. And if you had told me he had an ace, right, 100%, I would never bluff in this spot because trip aces is never folding, right? And he thought a long time. I think he had ace 6 or ace 7. I don't know, but that would be my guess because if he has a weak ace, that means he loses to everything, right? Any other ace he loses to, if I have ace 9, 10, jack, right? He loses to smaller aces, ace 5, ace deuce. He loses to weird 3, 4s, right? If I have that. So he loses to virtually everything except the bluff. And so I think he folded the only ace that he would fold, right? Like ace king's never folding. And I got the fold with the biggest bluff of my life. This didn't win me the match, but in my head, it's basically worth $8,000. They folded. I'll never know exactly what they had. I suspect it was ace six, ace seven, ace eight. So now we get on to the final hand, the hand that actually wins, and that's coming right up. Okay, we're on to the final hand of interest, the hand that won me the tournament. Again, same match. It's the fifth and final round against the same guy. Oh, by the way, after that bluff, I showed the bluff face up once he folded. And I did that on purpose because I was hoping it would make him mad. And it did. He went on tilt immediately. Right? He took one look at the bluff and his whole demeanor changed. He took his hat off. He stopped smiling. He stopped talking. He didn't say a single word the rest of the match. I think he was looking at my 9-high bluff, thinking to himself, I could have won the tournament right there. So again, that's important psychological information to have for this hand here. This is the hand that wins me the tournament. And you can see that I'm actually still behind in chips. Even after that bluff, I was still behind in chips. I had to win this hand to clinch the tournament. So I've got ace nine. There we go. He just calls, which is okay, right? So I raise it up with my ace. He calls again, and we see a flop of ace, 10, 5. Again, really good. It's hard to make a pair. Heads up, a pair is often the best hand, and top pair, a pair of aces, is really good. So I bet, and he calls. Another ace on the turn. Trip aces. And here is why it's important to be aware of the bluff that I had just run a few minutes ago. This time I really do have the ace. And I had just bluffed him with the biggest bluff of my life. Keep that in mind psychologically. So I decide now is a good time to check and pretend like, yeah, I stabbed the pot. There was an ace. I'm gonna bet range there, and hopefully he'll fold. Now that a second ace comes, now I'm really worried. What if he has an ace, right? I'm gonna check and do some pot control, see what happens. Plus, this guy is not afraid of bluffing, right? And he takes the bait. Huge bet. In fact, it was such a big bet that I'm starting to worry actually that he has an ace too, right? What if it's ace over ace, right? What if I'm dominated? But I can't fold trip aces. I'm not out of the tournament if I call. So I call and we go to the river. And the river, again, beautiful card, a 10. So the board is double paired. So I lose only to quad 10s, right? And if that's what I lose to, then that's what I lose to. Otherwise, I have the nuts. And I can't imagine anything would call, right? On a double paired board, it's really, really scary. Maybe a 10 would call a bet. So I check over to him, see what he does, and he goes all in. All in for 600,000 chips, 30 big blinds. So at this time, I was actually kind of laughing to myself. I thought, well, it's a chop, right? I probably got lucky. He probably has ace king, ace queen, ace jack. He probably had me crushed, and I got really lucky that the board paired again, and now we just both have aces full, and it's a chop. So I call instantly. I call, and I say out loud, it's probably a chop. And he looks really unhappy, really unhappy. He doesn't show. He just kind of, waves his cards and mucks them. I think psychologically he was mad that I ran that bluff earlier and he was running a bluff on me. And I think he miscalculated and didn't kind of take into account just how deep we were, right? Huge amount of chips, 80 big blinds in the pot. I didn't think it was a good spot to bluff for all in size because you're obviously getting called by an ace, maybe even a 10, or you're only getting called by a full house, right? So it's hard to make a bluff there unless you really know your opponent doesn't have those. But anyway, I win that. He had, just a few chips left. A couple hands later, we were all in, and I managed to take it down. So one of the best tournaments of my life. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's pretty long. Check out Portland Meadows. So the Portland Meadows Poker Room Social Club here in Portland, Oregon. It's on Facebook. They have a great, it's just a great place, great tournament. And I can't say enough things about it. All right, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching, and cheers. My first poker vlog